Please comment where you are watching in the world. I was half watching reruns of Parks and Rec and half scrolling through Tinder, not really looking for anything. Maybe a brief distraction. A little validation. You know, the typical millennial cocktail of loneliness and low-stakes optimism. Then I saw her. Her name was Elodie. The kind of name you don't forget. Her pictures were magnetic, high contrast, a little moody. One showed her in front of the Fremont Troll in Seattle, wearing a leather jacket and holding a pink umbrella. Another had her sitting on the hood of a vintage Camaro, one boot resting on the bumper, her eyes fixed on the lens like she knew something you didn't. But it wasn't just the photos. It was her bio. It read, "I collect postcards I'll never send, have a running list of books I pretend to have read, and once got banned from a trivia night for arguing about the chemical structure of Nutella. Let's make a mistake that becomes a story." It was clever, oddly specific, a little chaotic. I was charmed. I swiped right, expecting nothing. We matched. The conversation started quickly and stayed electric. She had this way of answering questions with questions, turning even the most basic small talk into something flirtatious and weirdly philosophical. Me. "So, what do you do when you're not being mysterious online?" Her. "I'm a barista who dreams of being a locksmith." "What's the last lie you told?" Every answer felt like a dare. By that evening, our texts had taken a sharp turn into steamy territory. Not that slow-burning flirtation where you nervously test boundaries. No, this was a full-on firestorm. She was bold, direct, unapologetically sexual. It was exhilarating. The kind of texting that makes you check your phone every 2 minutes, heart pounding, waiting for her next move. By midnight, we were swapping fantasies. She typed like she didn't care what I thought, which only made me care more. I didn't even know what she looked like in motion, and yet she had already taken up space in my mind. Then came the twist. "You're fun," she texted. "But I have to tell you something. Don't freak out." Cue the stomach drop. What could it be? Was she married? Did she live in another state? Was she really a robot from a glitchy AI startup in Redmond? "What is it?" I replied, trying to sound breezy. 3 dots flickered on the screen. They kept flickering. I waited. Then the message came. "I'm actually a guy. LOL. I stared at the screen. My first reaction wasn't even anger. It was confusion. Like my brain had to take a lap before it could catch up to what just happened. Had I missed something? Were there hints in the photos? The phrasing? The vibe? No. I'd been fully immersed in the idea of Elodie. The mystery. The edge. The smirk behind the words. And now, gone. I blinked a few times, my phone suddenly heavier in my hand. My heart, which had spent the last few hours operating like a drumline, now thudded in confusion. I'll be honest, part of me felt humiliated. I'd been vulnerable. Open. Kind of raw, actually. And this person, whoever they really were, had turned that into a game. But the other part of me? The part that had been quietly grappling with his own spectrum of attraction for years? That part wasn't angry. It was curious. So I typed back. "Joke's on you. I'm bi." And I hit send. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a laugh. Maybe a conversation. Maybe a moment of realness. Instead, the chat disappeared. He unmatched me. Just like that, Elodie, or whoever he was, vanished. All the messages, the heat, the build-up evaporated in a second. It was like none of it had ever happened. Except it had. My mind was still buzzing with the words we'd exchanged, the tension we'd built, and now, the weird emptiness of it all. I sat back on my couch, phone resting on my chest, the opening credits of Parks and Rec looping again in the background. A wave of embarrassment washed over me, but it didn't last long. Because something else took its place. Reflection. Was it weird? Yes. Was it invasive? Absolutely. But the more I thought about it, the more I started to understand how layered the experience was. I wasn't angry because I'd flirted with a guy. I wasn't mad because the messages were hot. I was upset because I'd let my guard down, and someone had used that moment for their own amusement. It wasn't about gender. It was about trust. I told my roommate, Sam, about it the next morning while we made eggs in our tiny Capitol Hill kitchen. His reaction wasn't what I expected. "Dude," he said, flipping a pancake, "that's actually kind of poetic. You had a connection with someone based solely on words. That's rare. Even if it got weird." "Yeah," I said. "Rare and humiliating." He shrugged. "Still human." That stuck with me. Because it was true. I hadn't fallen for a body, or a voice, or even a name. I'd fallen for the rhythm of a conversation. The volley of wit. The rhythm of desire that pulses between two people when they're both fully in it, even if one of them is pretending. I didn't tell many people about the incident after that. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't quite know how to explain it. It wasn't a horror story. It wasn't a triumphant coming out moment either. It was something stranger, quieter, a weird little turning point in how I understood myself. Am I glad it happened? Not exactly. But I'm not sorry either. Because in the age of curated profiles and endless swipes, it reminded me that connection, real connection, isn't about boxes we check or labels we wear. It's about honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to own our desires, even when they catch us off guard. So yeah, maybe it started as a casual fling. Maybe it turned into a prank. But for one night, in the glow of a screen, I let myself feel something real. And that's not nothing. I met him on Bumble, where he used the name Wesley. I don't know if that was his real name, but at the time it didn't matter. His profile was oddly endearing. A picture of him in front of a tiki bar, another of him holding a rescue puppy, and a bio that read, retired, reformed, and ready to rumble, with a good book or a strong cocktail. Wesley was 56. I was 29. Before you judge me, it wasn't a daddy issues thing. I was just tired of 20-something guys whose idea of romance was sending me a TikTok at 2 a.m. with the caption, "This made me think of you, LOL." Wesley messaged me first. He used full sentences, spelled out words, used punctuation. I was impressed already. We chatted for a few days. He was charming, funny, and surprisingly self-aware. He told me about his last relationship, a woman from Sarasota who got too into crystals and threatened to hex his dog. I laughed out loud. He didn't take himself too seriously. He liked old movies, made his own marinades, and once took a course on flirting for introverts just to stay sharp. So when he asked if I wanted to meet for drinks at a beachside tiki bar in Clearwater, I said yes. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. The kind of Florida day where the humidity makes your clothes stick within seconds, but the ocean breeze makes you forgive it. I wore a loose floral dress and minimal expectations. Wesley was already there when I arrived. He stood up when he saw me, tan, silver-haired, and grinning like he'd just won something. "You're even prettier in person," he said, handing me a drink before I'd even sat down. "Mai Tai." I took a wild guess. I took a sip. He wasn't wrong. We talked for hours. About everything. His retirement from working in hospitality. My freelance graphic design jobs. His love of obscure jazz vinyl. My love of chaotic reality TV. He was the kind of guy who told stories with hand gestures and random accents. And I'll admit, I was into it. Not romantically, maybe, but I liked the attention. The novelty. The way he kept leaning in like I was the most interesting thing on that beach. The drinks kept coming. I had 2 Mai Tais. He had 3. Then a rum runner. Then something that came in a coconut that he insisted I try. I took a sip and nearly blacked out from the sweetness. At some point, the conversation shifted. "You know," he said, his voice dropping half an octave, "I haven't felt this kind of spark in a long time." I smiled politely. "It's been a nice afternoon." "No, listen," he said, leaning in. "I mean it. I think you're something special." I laughed nervously. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he said, placing his hand lightly on mine. "You've got that light, that energy. Like, I don't know, a woman who knows what she wants." I blinked. It was flattering. Kind of. But also intense. "I just met you," I reminded him. "Exactly," he said. "And I already can't stop thinking about you." "Okay, red flag." I checked the time. We'd only been there for about 2 hours. "I really should get going soon," I said. "I have a thing later." He frowned, visibly deflated. "Already? But we're just getting started." I stood up, smoothing my dress. "It's been great, really. Wait," he interrupted. "Before you go, could I ask for just one thing?" I hesitated. "What?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Just humor me. One quick photo. I want to remember this moment." I blinked, confused. "Of us?" "No, just you," he said. "Standing there. In the sun. You look like a goddess right now." I laughed, trying not to roll my eyes. "That's a little much." "Please," he said. "For me?" It was too weird to argue with, so I struck a quick pose, shoulders back, fake smile, let him take the photo. "Perfect," he said, staring at it for a beat too long. "You're perfect." I turned to leave. "Thanks again for the drinks." That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. That night, I got my first text. Wesley, 7:46 p.m. I can't stop thinking about your smile. Followed by, Wesley, 7:59 p.m. You have no idea how beautiful you are. Then, Wesley, 8:36 p.m. I think I'm falling for you. Is that crazy? I didn't answer. At 10:12 p.m., he sent a photo of me from the bar, the one he'd taken, captioned, "Look at this angel." I stared at the screen, unsettled. I hadn't even saved his number. How had he taken a casual afternoon and turned it into a Nicholas Sparks fever dream? The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Wesley, 9:04 a.m. Good morning, sunshine. Did you dream about me? Wesley, 9:10 a.m. I did. You were wearing that dress again. Wesley, 9:14 a.m. Except this time, it was on my bedroom floor, winky face, asterisk, asterisk. I nearly spit out my coffee. Okay. Nope. I blocked the number. 2 hours later, I got a message request on Instagram. Wesley again 49 wants to send you a message. I didn't open it. Deleted it without reading. I thought that would be the end of it. But Wesley was persistent. He found my portfolio website, linked in my Bumble bio, and sent a message through the contact form. Hey, it's me. I hope I didn't scare you off. I just feel like we have something real. Can I take you to dinner? Or even just coffee? I can be chill. Promise. I didn't respond. Another email came the next day, and the day after that. The tone shifted slightly. More desperate. More poetic. At one point, he quoted Pablo Neruda. I didn't even know anyone outside of a poetry MFA program read Neruda. Finally, I emailed back. Short and to the point. Hi Wesley. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm not interested in continuing this. Best. Tess. That was it. No niceties. No apology. Just closure. The email stopped. The truth is, Wesley wasn't dangerous. But he wasn't stable either. My friend Mallory wasn't looking for love. She'd tell you herself she wasn't even looking for a serious connection. She was just bored. Tired of closing up at the end of a long shift and scrolling through social media until she passed out. Mallory worked as a bartender at a popular neighborhood bar in Wicker Park, Chicago. The kind of spot with vintage arcade machines in the back, dim Edison bulbs dangling precariously from the ceiling, and a jukebox that never quite worked right. It was always packed on the weekends, and her tips were solid enough that she didn't have to think too hard about money. She was sharp, witty in a way that made people think twice before trying to impress her, and fiercely independent. She'd been through enough to know how to take care of herself, which is probably why she didn't think twice when she matched with this guy, Jason. His profile was fine. Harmless, really. No shirtless mirror selfies, no red flags. Just a couple of average photos. One with him standing in front of the bean, another holding a coffee cup with a caption about Mondays being the worst. His bio was short and inoffensive, Chicago native. Love tacos, dogs, and good conversation. Mallory rolled her eyes but figured sure. Why not? They met up the following Thursday for drinks. Nothing fancy, just a dive bar on Milwaukee Avenue with cheap whiskey and a Pac-Man machine. She said he was easy to talk to. Polite. The kind of guy who asked her about her job, actually listened when she answered, and laughed at her sarcastic takes on the absurdity of dating apps. He didn't push anything, didn't try too hard. There was a certain calculated normalcy to him, so average, in fact, that it made her drop her guard. When he suggested heading back to her apartment, she didn't hesitate. She had rules, sure, but she also had autonomy. She was 32 years old, for God's sake, not a teenager who needed to be walked home. They got back to her place, an airy third-floor walk-up near Logan Square, and shared a couple more drinks on her couch. Nothing dramatic. No hot and heavy make-out scene you'd see in a Netflix drama. Just two adults, mildly tipsy, enjoying each other's company. He left before sunrise. Mallory woke up alone, slightly hungover, with a vague memory of him kissing her forehead before disappearing. There was a text from him already. Thanks for last night, smiley face. That was it. No follow-up. No, let's hang out again this weekend. She didn't care. It had been casual from the start. For the next few days, she barely thought about him. Until Sunday. She was standing in the checkout line at the Jewel-Osco on Ashland when her debit card declined. She laughed nervously, trying not to make eye contact with the cashier. Weird, she muttered, pulling out her backup card. That one worked, but something about the moment stuck with her. Later that afternoon, curled up on her couch with a bag of kettle chips and her laptop, she opened her banking app. Her stomach dropped. The balance was nearly zero. Her checking account, usually hovering around a few thousand for emergencies, had been drained. Dozens of transactions she didn't recognize. Electronics from Best Buy, food delivery from places she hadn't ordered from, and multiple obscure streaming services. She blinked, thinking maybe there was some glitch. But the numbers didn't lie. She scrolled in disbelief. The charges had started on Friday morning, right after she'd slept with Jason. At first, she thought maybe her card had been cloned. It was possible, right? She worked in a bar. Cards changed hands all the time. But then the memory hit her like a slap to the face. That moment when she'd gone to the bathroom, leaving him alone in her apartment for just a few minutes. Her purse had been sitting on the counter. Her wallet was right there. The realization made her skin crawl. She checked her credit card next, just to be safe, even though she rarely used it. And there it was again, charges she didn't recognize. This time, it wasn't big-ticket items. It was subscriptions. Netflix, Hulu, Sling, Amazon Prime, even some niche horror movie app called Screamer Plus. Jason hadn't just stolen from her wallet. He'd embedded himself into her digital life. Mallory tried to keep calm. She was a problem solver by nature, not the type to wallow. She called her bank, filed fraud claims, canceled her cards. But the process was slow, infuriating, and at times humiliating. She'd always prided herself on being in control. This situation stripped her of that. The worst part? She couldn't even confront him. His Tinder profile was gone. Deleted. Like he'd never existed. She searched her phone, hoping maybe she had a last name or a work detail. Anything she could use. But Jason had played it smart. No last name. No tags on photos. His number, she realized, was now disconnected. A ghost. Mallory didn't cry. Not at first. She got angry. Furious, actually. She told me the story when we went out for drinks the following week, her voice tight with rage and disbelief. I asked if she'd reported it, and she nodded. Of course, she said. But the cops barely took it seriously. One officer literally said, "You shouldn't have let a stranger into your home." Classic. But Mallory wasn't done. She remembered something, a mutual friend who'd once pointed out Jason on Facebook. It was vague, but it was a thread. She reached out to the friend, cautiously, not wanting to spill too many details. "Hey," she typed, "this is random, but do you remember that guy Jason? I think you mentioned knowing him from somewhere." The reply came fast. "Oh my God. Did something happen? He did the exact same thing to me." Mallory's blood ran cold. The friend, let's call her Denise, told a story nearly identical to Mallory's. A casual date. A charming guy. A night of drinks and flirty banter. A one-night stand. And then days later vanished money. Denise had been too embarrassed to tell anyone. She thought it was a freak incident. But now, realizing Mallory had gone through the same thing, she felt a surge of vindication and determination. Together, they started digging. With Denise's help, Mallory pieced together a clearer picture of Jason. He wasn't a random Tinder user. He was a serial scammer. A low-level con artist who used dating apps as his hunting ground. Always the same method: charm, intimacy, distraction, theft. Then disappear. They found 3 more women. All from Chicago. All with eerily similar stories. Mallory filed a full police report, this time with documentation from the other victims. She contacted her banks again, this time with a clearer narrative. Some charges were reversed. Others were still under review. But the emotional toll lingered. "I feel violated," she told me one night over whiskey and ginger beer. "Not just because he stole from me, but because I let him in. I trusted him enough to fall asleep next to him." His name was Colin, and we'd matched on Hinge about 5 days earlier. His profile was solid, nothing spectacular, but not terrifying either. He had a decent smile, wore a shirt with actual buttons in most of his photos, and his bio was confidently bland. Love live music, good food, and staying active. In Austin, that put him in the top 40% of daters. Not amazing, but promising. We chatted for a few days. He was responsive without being clingy, funny in a sort of dad joke way, and quick to suggest a meetup. He sent me the location for the date, a cozy little Italian restaurant tucked between a yoga studio and a vape shop on South Lamar. I'd been there once before. It had great meatballs and a solid house red. "Perfect," I texted back. "Looking forward to it." Then came the second message. "Oh, and hope you don't mind, my mom's tagging along." I stared at my phone. "Excuse me?" "Sorry," I replied, assuming it was a joke. Your mom? Yeah, he said, adding a smiley face. She's got a date too. They've been talking on OkCupid. I thought it'd be fun. Like a double date. A double date. With his mother. And her date. At that point, I should have politely bowed out, claimed a migraine, a work emergency, a sudden realization that I was allergic to marinara. But I'd already picked out an outfit, and part of me was morbidly curious. What kind of person thinks this is okay? So I went. Because sometimes, you need a story more than you need a pleasant evening. I arrived early, hoping to grab a moment of sanity before the chaos began. The restaurant was warm and bustling, with the scent of garlic and oregano thick in the air. I slipped in and asked for the reservation, expecting to be led to a quiet table where I could decompress. Instead, I was waved toward a corner booth in the back, where 3 people were already seated. Colin, a woman with short red hair and an aggressively floral blouse, and a man who looked like he'd been dragged there against his will. Hey! Colin waved me over like we were long-lost friends. You made it! I walked over, trying to maintain my composure. Hi, I said, offering a polite smile. This is my mom, Trudy, he said, beaming. And this is her date, Carl. They met online, just like us. Trudy stood up to give me a hug. Not a handshake. A full-body, cheek-to-cheek hug that smelled faintly of lavender and menthol. Nice to meet you, sweetie, she chirped. Isn't this fun? Carl gave me a stiff nod. Hi, he mumbled, eyes darting around like he was looking for an escape route. I slid into the booth, boxed in between Colin and the wall. Trudy and Carl sat across from us. A waitress came by, and before I could even look at the menu, Trudy ordered a round of tequila shots. To break the ice, she said, raising her glass. I declined. Politely. Opted for a glass of Merlot instead. Carl looked like he was reconsidering every decision that had led him to this moment. The evening began to unravel slowly. Trudy dominated the conversation, regaling us with stories about her cats, her recent trip to Sedona, and her belief that she was once abducted by aliens. Carl nodded politely. Colin interrupted occasionally to tell childhood stories I didn't ask for. I once swallowed a marble when I was 6, he said proudly. Thought I was gonna die. Mom made me eat bananas for 3 days. That's how we got through it. Trudy chimed in. Bananas and prayer. I tried to steer the conversation toward safer ground. Movies. Hobbies. Literally anything that didn't involve someone's gastrointestinal trauma. So Colin, I asked, what do you do for work again? He sells ergonomic desk chairs, Trudy interrupted. But he's terrible at sitting still. Always fidgeting. Remember in 3rd grade, when you tried to make a jetpack out of soda bottles? Colin laughed like it was the punchline to a joke I didn't get. Classic me. The food arrived. I took a bite of lasagna and tried to pretend this wasn't happening. Then came the spaghetti incident. Trudy, in a fit of what I can only describe as misplaced whimsy, tried to feed Carl a bite of her pasta. He leaned back instinctively, and the fork jabbed his cheek. Sauce splattered across the table. Trudy burst out laughing and dabbed at his face with a napkin. Isn't he adorable? She asked. Carl looked like he was mentally drafting a Craigslist ad for a new identity. I sipped my wine and stared at my plate. Just get through the meal, I told myself. Then you can leave and never speak of this again. But the night had one more horror up its sleeve. Karaoke. Yes, karaoke. In an Italian restaurant. Without a karaoke machine. Trudy, emboldened by 2 shots of tequila and a glass of Chianti, stood up, grabbed a spoon, and launched into a warbled rendition of Total Eclipse of the Heart. No music. No warning. Just full-throated Bonnie Tyler in the middle of a crowded dining room. Colin clapped along. She's got pipes, doesn't she? I wanted to crawl under the table. The waitress came by with the check, her face a carefully practiced mask of neutrality. Trudy insisted on paying. It's my treat, she declared. I had such a blast. Carl muttered something about needing the restroom and disappeared. He never came back. As we stepped outside, Colin turned to me grinning. So, he said, when can I see you again? I stared at him. Blinked. You're joking, right? His smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? I thought tonight was amazing. Amazing? I echoed, incredulous. Yeah, Mom loved you. There was no polite way to say what I was thinking, so I didn't try. I mumbled something about being busy and walked briskly to my car. When I got home, I poured a glass of wine and deleted the Hinge app. Just for the night. I needed a break, from Colin, from Trudy, from the idea that this was what dating had become. The next morning, I woke up to a text. Had a great time. Mom says hi. Let's do it again soon, smiley face. I blocked his number. Now, when people ask me about my worst first date, I tell them about the Italian restaurant in Austin, the karaoke spoon, and the man who brought his mom on a Tinder date. I didn't expect to sleep with him, really. I never do. Let's just start there. I met Caleb at a friend's games night. He brought homemade hummus and wore a band tee for a band I pretended to know. We ended up on the same team for Pictionary, and he guessed deep sea octopus before I was even halfway done drawing. He was cute, a little awkward, and actually listened when I spoke, 3 rarities in the Austin dating pool. We started talking after the game, lingered by the kitchen while other people peeled off and Ubered home. He offered to walk me to my car, and I surprised us both by saying, "Or, we could just go back to my place." He blinked. "Yeah, that. Let's do that." It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a full body, can't keep our hands off each other movie moment. But it was nice. Comfortable. He was considerate. Asked questions. Took his time. The kind of hookup where you don't immediately regret your life choices afterward. We fell asleep around 3 a.m., limbs tangled, his arm under my neck doing a noble but stupid job of pretending to be a pillow. Around 7:30 a.m., I woke up to an empty bed. Normal. I figured he'd snuck out early. It happens. No big deal. But then I heard movement in the hallway. A door creaked. A muffled curse. I sat up, heart thudding a little faster. "Caleb?" I called out. No answer. Then I heard it again. A grunt. A clanging sound. Something like metal hitting porcelain. I got up and padded into the hallway, still in my oversized t-shirt. The bathroom door was open just a crack. Inside, I could see Caleb, shirtless, hunched over my toilet, holding what looked like a stick. A stick. From outside. I said, blinking. "What are you doing?" He jumped like I'd caught him mid-crime. "Oh, hey, good morning. I was just, handling something." "Handling what, exactly?" He looked down at the bowl. Then back at me. There was a situation. I stepped closer. The air hit me before the visual did. "Okay, wow," I said, recoiling slightly. "Did you clog it?" "I didn't want to bother you," he said quickly. "So I thought I'd fix it myself." "With a stick?" I asked, now fully awake. "Well, you didn't have a plunger," he said, as if that explained everything. "So I went outside and found a substitute." He gestured to the tool. A thick, jagged branch that looked like it had been broken off a hedge. "You went into my yard," I said slowly, "to find a stick, to unjam my toilet." He nodded. "Yeah, I thought it was kind of resourceful." I blinked at him. The stick was now stained. The water in the bowl was a murky swirl of shame. My bathroom, my sanctuary, smelled like defeat. "You could have just asked," I said, trying to maintain a shred of patience. "I didn't want to wake you," he said earnestly. "You looked peaceful." I stared. "So your backup plan was doing unspeakable things to my plumbing with a branch." He rubbed the back of his neck. I panicked. I walked away. Not because I was mad, but because I needed a moment. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window at the morning sun hitting my tiny backyard, the same backyard where he had just foraged for tools like a caveman of shame. He followed a minute later, looking sheepish. "I'm really sorry," he said. "It's just, I didn't want to leave a mess." I turned and looked at him. "You made a mess trying not to make a mess." He winced. "Yeah." We stood in silence. Finally, I said, "I have a plunger. It's under the sink, in the cabinet labeled cleaning stuff." "Oh, yeah." He nodded slowly. I didn't think to look there." I stared at him. And then, to my own surprise, I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity broke through the awkwardness like a ray of light. I leaned against the counter, laughing so hard I had to set my glass down. He smiled, relieved. "You're not going to kick me out?" "Oh, I'm absolutely kicking you out," I said between giggles. "But not because I hate you. Just because I need several hours to emotionally recover from this." "That's fair." He offered to clean the bathroom before leaving. I declined. He offered to buy me a new toilet brush. I declined that too. I told him he could Venmo me $12 for the emotional damage. He actually did. I walked him to the door. He gave me a weirdly sweet hug. Then he left, still shirtless, carrying his shoes, the stick left in my trash can like a haunting relic. Later that day, I texted my best friend Naomi and told her everything. She called me 10 seconds later and screamed into the phone. He used a stick. Yes. From outside. Yes. To fix your toilet? Yes, Naomi. I was there. We laughed until we cried. A week later, I got a DM from Caleb. Hey. So, second date? I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, only if we meet in public, and only at a place with industrial plumbing. He never responded to me. Thank God. I hadn't felt that kind of chemistry in years. An instant connection. From the moment I met Mark at the Italian place just off Hawthorne, I felt it. He leaned into every word I said like it mattered. He made me laugh, not the polite kind, but the kind that slips out before you can stop it. And he listened, really listened. When I told him how my dad used to read me science fiction stories before bed, he asked which ones. Not as a follow-up line, but because he genuinely wanted to know. Dinner was perfect. Not in the cliché, rom-com way. It was Messier. I spilled wine on my sleeve. He dropped his fork. We both laughed too loud. But it felt easy. Familiar. Like we'd skipped the awkward phase and picked up mid-season, already invested in the plot. When the bill came, he didn't do that awkward half-reach or the should we split dance. He just said, I've got this one, with a soft smile that didn't ask for anything in return. After dinner, we walked. It was late April, and Portland was still flirting with spring. The air was damp in that way it always is here, like the city's perpetually exhaling. The streets glistened under the glow of streetlights, and tree branches bowed gently overhead like they were eavesdropping. We walked without a destination, just that unspoken agreement to keep the night going a little longer. Our shoulders brushed. Once, he reached for my hand. I let him hold it. He told me about growing up in Eugene. His mom ran a bakery. His dad was a mechanic who loved jazz. He said he used to sneak extra croissants to his teachers so they'd grade his papers faster. I told him about my brother, who lives in Montana now and sends me blurry photos of elk. About how I secretly hate running, but do it anyway because I don't know how to be still. We laughed. We shared pieces of ourselves. The kind of conversation that makes you believe something is beginning. We were 2 blocks from my apartment when it happened. It was sudden, violent. A sound first like thunder, but sharper lower. Then motion. A blur of silver streaking through the intersection. And then Mark was gone. No warning. No scream. Just a sickening thud, and the sound of my own breath catching in my throat. I turned. He was lying in the street. Twisted. Motionless. The car didn't stop. It didn't even hesitate. Taillights vanished down the street like nothing had happened. I don't remember screaming, but I know I did. I remember running to him, my knees hitting the wet pavement. His eyes were open, glassy. His chest moved barely. There was blood. Too much blood. People came. Someone called 911. Someone else wrapped a jacket under his head. I held his hand because it was the only thing I could do. I kept telling him, "You're okay. You're okay. Stay with me." He looked at me once, just once, and tried to say something. His lips moved. No sound came out. Then he closed his eyes. The ambulance came fast. Officers pulled me aside, asked me questions I could barely answer. What kind of car? Which direction? Did I see the license plate? I didn't know. I could barely remember my own name. I didn't go with him to the hospital. They wouldn't let me. I stood on the curb with blood on my hands and gravel in my knees until a kind stranger, a woman in a hoodie and slippers, wrapped a blanket around me and stayed with me until a friend could come get me. Mark died that night. I found out the next morning, sitting on my couch with my best friend Emily holding my hand. Her eyes were red. My phone was in her lap, screen still open to the hospital's number. They said he'd suffered massive internal injuries, that he was gone within an hour of arriving. I didn't cry at first. I just sat there stunned, like my body had gone offline in protest. We'd had one date. One. And yet, I felt like something had been ripped from me. Not a boyfriend. Not even a real partner. But a possibility. A future that had started to sketch itself in the corners of my mind. I kept replaying the night. The sound of his laugh. The warmth of his hand. The way he'd said, "You're a little dangerous, aren't you?" when I challenged his take on Star Trek versus Star Wars. I went to the memorial. His sister reached out to me. She'd found my number in his texts. Told me he'd mentioned me that night. Said he thought it was the best date he'd had in years. That he was excited. I stood in the back of the church, not sure if I belonged. People around me cried, shared stories. I listened. Took it all in. Mark had been kind. Quietly hilarious. A good brother. A loyal friend. He'd just started a new job. He'd just moved into a new apartment. There was so much just. The police never found the driver. There were no usable cameras. No witnesses who caught the plate. It was classified as a hit and run. An open case. A cold file waiting for a miracle. For a long time, I couldn't walk past that street corner. I kept thinking I'd see him. That some cosmic glitch would undo it. That I'd wake up and the date would still be happening, and we'd still be laughing about croissants and pretending we didn't want the night to end. But it did. It ended in asphalt and steel and a silence I still carry. Some nights I dream about him. Not the accident. Just him. Sitting across from me, sipping wine, smiling like he has a secret. I wake up with tears on my pillow and the memory of his voice slipping away before I can hold on to it. I don't tell new people about Mark. It's not a first date story. It's not even a 10th date story. It feels too surreal, too heavy. Like it shouldn't have happened. But it did. I'd known this guy for a while before we officially started dating. He was one of those people who seemed to have connections everywhere. Always knew the bartender, always had a free drink coming his way, always seemed to get into places without paying a cover. He had this laid-back confidence about him, the kind of guy who could slide into any scene and make it look like he belonged there. Naturally, I assumed our first date would reflect that same energy, maybe a trendy cocktail lounge with dim lighting and velvet booths, or some secret speakeasy only locals knew about. So you can imagine my surprise when he texted me the address of a pay-by-the-pound Chinese buffet. At first, I thought he was joking. I even reread the message, half expecting it to say, "Just kidding, meet me at this cool rooftop bar instead." Nope. It was the buffet. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was being ironic, or maybe this was one of those quirky spots with amazing food and a cult following. Or maybe, and this was a long shot, he just really loved egg rolls and lo mein. Whatever the reason, I decided to roll with it. I got there first and stood outside for a minute, wondering if I should even go in. It didn't look terrible, but it also didn't scream first date. More like work lunch when you forgot to pack something, or dinner with your uncle who doesn't believe in tipping. Before I could fully talk myself out of it, he showed up, looking as casual as ever, like this was the most normal first date spot in the world. He greeted me with a quick hug, and we headed inside. The vibe was exactly what you'd expect. Bright fluorescent lights, sticky plastic trays, and a long line of steam tables filled with food that all kind of looked the same shade of brown. But again, I was trying to keep an open mind. I grabbed a plate and followed his lead. That's when things took a sharp turn. He started off fine, some fried rice, a couple of spring rolls, but then I noticed him being selective. Really selective. He was picking up pieces of chicken, examining them like he was a jeweler inspecting diamonds, and then pulling them apart. Right there in line. He'd stripped the meat off the bones and tossed the scraps back into the tray. I stood there, frozen, watching this little operation unfold. What are you doing?" I finally asked. "Oh," he said, completely unfazed. "You pay by the pound here, so I don't want to get charged for the bones." I blinked at him. He said it so matter-of-factly, like this was some genius life hack I should be thanking him for sharing. Meanwhile, I was standing there with my plate full of normal, undeboned food, wondering if I'd accidentally agreed to go out with the human embodiment of a coupon book. We paid. Well, he paid for his half, obviously, and sat down at a wobbly table with mismatched chairs. He seemed completely at ease, like this was the most romantic setting imaginable. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop picturing him digging through trays of chicken like some sort of buffet archaeologist. I kept trying to find a way to salvage the night, steering the conversation toward anything besides his questionable dining habits. But it was no use. The damage had been done. At one point, he leaned back in his chair and patted his stomach. "Not bad for under $10, he said, grinning like he'd just pulled off the heist of the century. I forced a smile and nodded, all the while mentally drafting my exit strategy. When the check came, yes, there was still a check even at a buffet, he made a big show of calculating the tip down to the cent. I half expected him to pull out a calculator. By then, I was fully ready to call it a night. I excused myself to the restroom, took a quick look in the mirror, and gave myself a little pep talk. "You're never seeing him again. Just get through the next 5 minutes." I came back to find him still fiddling with his change. He looked up, smiled, and said, "I think I actually saved around 14 cents by ditching the bones." He laughed, clearly proud of himself. And that was it. That was the moment I knew this wasn't going anywhere. I couldn't even pretend to find it funny. I just smiled, grabbed my coat, and said something polite about having an early morning. She wanted to meet me alone. On the beach. No one else around. Definitely a good sign. Tinder was supposed to be a wonderland of discreet, anonymous fun that awaited me after an extremely painful divorce. Instead, I found the opportunity to churn through more rejections in an hour that I could hope to tally after a year of social events and bar crawls. Then Tabby swiped right. I couldn't believe it at first. Cute, funny, employed, capable of driving herself. Pretty much everything that I was looking for in a Tinder match. And I won't lie, I have the same needs that everyone else with the app has. So she wanted to meet me on the sand at Hollywood Beach near Ventura, alone, far from prying eyes. It was the perfect match. Of course, I thought it was too good to be true at first. I was mostly convinced that she wouldn't be there when I showed up. So when I followed her cryptic instructions to take a specific path between two houses, following a beeline to the water, I expected to find nothing. With my phone flashlight bobbing in front of me, I was quickly surrounded by darkness. There's about 200 yards of sand between the houses and the water, so I soon felt like I was lost in the middle of a desert. No house lights were on nearby. I was entirely alone. I was just about ready to turn around. And then I saw her. She was lying face up in the sand. Tabby. She didn't say anything, but I knew it had to be her. No one else was within screaming distance. So I aimed my flashlight at her and walked straight forward so that I wouldn't surprise or scare her. Bizarrely enough, she remained lying down until I was standing right beside. Hi. I glanced down and smiled. She looked as good as her picture and better, which shocked me. She had on a red dress, which was splayed in the sand, that looked ready for a night out. Tabby was gazing up at the stars in an unblinking stare, but she reached for me and beckoned with a wag of her finger. I sat in the cold sand next to her, setting my phone down to allow just enough illumination so that we weren't completely blind. I hesitated for a moment before taking her hand in mine. She squeezed my fingers playfully before running her nails up my forearm, leaving a trail of goosebumps in her wake. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. I hadn't had an intimate connection that left me truly happy in longer than I could remember. I didn't know why she just wanted silent touching, but decided not to question her motives. So I reached forward to stroke her cheek in the semi-darkness. Unlike her arm, Tabby's cheek was lukewarm. Her head turned away from me as I grazed it, continuing to rotate as she broke contact with my fingers. With a sound like pulling a shoe from a puddle of syrup on a wooden floor, Tabby's head twisted away from her neck and rolled onto the sand. There was just enough light to see the squishy viscera in her ravaged stump. I froze. For a moment, I could only sense the crashing of distant waves, cold sand beneath me, and Tabby's dead head. Movie deaths are always profound and dramatic. I didn't know how to process the fact that a human body can break with all the everydayness of a cracking egg. Then I noticed that her hand was gripping my arm. I stared in abject horror as her fingers continued to creep upward, despite her lack of a head. Her other arm reached forward to join it. In fact, Tabby's entire body was squirming toward me. The sand beneath her neck moved, and everything made horrifying sense. Somebody was wearing Tabby's clothes. They had cut off her head, lay down on the beach, then buried their own head in the sand, placing her decapitated appendage above their own. I would have recognized it immediately in the daylight, but the darkness had hidden just enough. They wrapped both hands around my elbow and sat up as a cascade of sand rained down from an obscured face. I saw dark eyes looking back at me before pure instinct took over. I grabbed a fistful of sand with my other arm and threw it at those eyes. With an unnatural hiss, the grip on my elbow loosened just slightly, and that was enough. I yanked my arm away, scrambled to my feet, and raced into the darkness. Panic blur settled gradually back into cognitive stability. I could have been running for 19 hours or 13 seconds. I truly don't know. Of course, I hadn't wasted time grabbing my phone, especially since the bright flashlight was still on and would have made it impossible for me to hide. As a result, in the pitch black of the beach, there was no way to find my car, and in my sheer terror, I had no idea where I ended up. I found myself on a dark highway with no street lamps and no idea what direction I needed to go. I felt ready to scream. Had the entire world disappeared? Where were all the motorists? Almost as if in answer to my prayer, twin lights flashed far down the road. Adrenaline joy raced through me as I ran toward the lights, my shoes slapping against the ground as I sprinted forward. The car forced itself to a screeching halt just before slamming into me. I must have scared the shit out of the driver, but I didn't care. I raced to the passenger side window. It opened an inch. "Can I help you?" came a timid voice from inside. "Yes," I responded, almost laughing with relief. I was attacked on the beach and lost my phone. "Could you call the police and help me find my car?" The kindness of strangers really is the best of things. I reflected on this as we moved back down the highway, my tension finally melting. Shit, I must have looked terrible. I looked into the rearview mirror to check. Dark eyes looked back at me from the rear seat of the car. They were bloodshot, as though someone had just thrown sand in them. I spun around, convincing myself that it was all in my head, that I would find the seat empty. Someone wearing Tabby's red dress was lying in the back seat. I jumped out of the moving car just as a familiar hand reached for me. Yes, it hurt worse than anything I'd ever felt to hit the pavement at 30 miles an hour. But it didn't kill me, which was the only thing I needed to keep going. Fortunately, we'd already almost made it back to my car. I raced, or hobbled in great pain, if I'm being honest, to my door. I jumped in, slammed on the ignition, and ripped out of there as fast as I could. I don't know how I made it home safely, because I spent more time checking the back seat than I did with my eyes on the road. My horror only increased as I realized that I must have been texting this psychopath the entire time, that Tabby was so intent on meeting me. How much did they know about my life? Of course, I typed all of this up to let you know as soon as I could, but I don't know if I'm safe. I should have known something was off when she said the party had a dress code. Not formal, not themed, just vague, wear black or beige. Something neutral. That was the first red flag. The second was that her name was Tegan, and she spelled it with 2 E's. Tegan. I met her on Tinder. Her bio said, "I'm building an empire. Want to build one with me?" I should have swiped left, but the photo of her holding a martini in a bathtub full of rose petals convinced me otherwise. We matched on a Thursday. She invited me to a party the next night. Low-key, she said. Some drinks, some music, just good vibes. I was 2 weeks out of a breakup and had recently spent $23 on a vibrating chastity cage I never opened. Good vibes sounded like exactly what I needed. I showed up to the address she texted, an aggressively beige house in a Las Vegas subdivision where every lawn looked suspiciously synthetic. The porch lights were dimmed just enough to feel ominous. A sign on the door read, "Welcome, future leaders." I paused. Future what? Before I could turn around, the door swung open. Tegan stood there in a beige bodycon dress, her eyes wide and hungry like she'd just emerged from a 3-day fast, and I was a rotisserie chicken. "You made it," she said, pulling me by the hand into the house. The interior was minimalist, as in empty. No couches, no art. Just folding chairs arranged in rows, a whiteboard, and a ring light in the corner aimed at a tripod. The only music was an instrumental loop that sounded like stock footage of a TED Talk. I turned slowly. "So, where's the party?" Tegan beamed. "You're standing in it." That was red flag number 3. She handed me a drink, kombucha of course, and guided me into a seat between 2 teenage boys who looked like they'd just escaped from a GNC. One wore a t-shirt that said, "Be your own boss." The other had Alpha Grind Set tattooed on his forearm. I nodded politely. "So, what brings you guys here?" The one with the tattoo said, "I'm here to stop being a beta bitch." I blinked. Cool. Then the lights dimmed. A man with impossibly white teeth stepped onto a platform at the front of the room. He wore a headset mic, a tailored beige suit, and the kind of smile usually reserved for cult leaders and pharmaceutical reps. "Welcome," he said, "to the beginning of your new life." Oh no, we were in a pitch. A multi-level marketing pitch. Tegan leaned over and whispered, "Isn't he amazing?" "That's sane. I've made over $2,000 this month just using his method." I stared at her. "Doing what?" She winked. "Helping people discover their potential." That was red flag number 4. And 5. And possibly 6 through 10. Zane launched into a PowerPoint titled The Pyramid of Prosperity, which didn't even try to hide what it was. He talked about residual income, entrepreneurial synergy, and something called passive social monetization, which I'm pretty sure just means dmang strangers until they block you. Meanwhile, the teenage boys beside me were nodding like they'd just found religion. I tried to stand up. Tegan grabbed my wrist. "Just stay through the first module," she said. "Module? I thought this was a party." Her grip tightened. "It is. The kind that changes lives. I sat down. Mostly because I didn't want to cause a scene. Also because I was weirdly curious. Zane clicked to a slide labeled Lifestyle Freedom. It showed a shirtless man on a yacht surrounded by women in bikinis, each holding a protein shake. This life, Zane said, is waiting for you. All it takes is $199 to unlock your starter investment kit. The boys beside me clapped. Then things got darker. Zane dimmed the lights even more. A video played. Slow-motion clips of people crying, hugging, pushing wheelbarrows full of cash. One woman looked directly into the camera and whispered, "I was nothing before this. Now I'm everything." I turned to Tegan. She was crying. "I felt that," she whispered. I needed to leave. I stood up again. She followed me to the hallway. "Wait," she said. "Don't go yet. I want to show you something." Before I could protest, she pulled me into a side room. There was a mattress on the floor. Candles. A whiteboard listing names and numbers. A duffel bag full of energy drinks. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it. "I feel like you're resisting your own potential," she said, moving toward me. "I feel like I'm resisting a hostage situation," I replied. She laughed. "You're funny. That's good. You'll do well here. I'm not joining your pyramid cult, Tegan." "It's not a cult," she said, unzipping the front of her dress. "It's a lifestyle." I blinked. She wasn't wearing a bra, but she was wearing herbs. Like actual herbs. Tucked into her cleavage. Basil. Oregano. Maybe thyme. "What is that?" I asked, pointing. She smiled. "My spice rack." I stared at her. She stared at me. There was a long pause. "Okay," I said, backing toward the door. "So this has been insane. But I'm gonna go." She pouted. "You're missing an opportunity." "You're right," I said. "I'm missing the opportunity to run into traffic." I opened the door. Zane was standing there. "You leaving already?" he asked, blocking my path. "Yes," I said. "I left my stove on. And my dignity." He didn't move. For a second, I thought I might actually have to fight my way out of a beige-walled MLM bunker. But then one of the teens from earlier, Alpha Grind Set, called out from the main room. "Zane, we're out of starter kits." Zane sighed and turned. Figures. No one ever plans for abundance. I slipped out the door before anyone could stop me. I drove home in silence, questioning every decision I'd made since downloading Tinder. When I got back to my apartment, I found a text from Tegan. "Tegan, you're not ready. But I'll be here when you are. Herb." I blocked her. When Harley suggested the Spice Slam as a first date, I thought he meant something cute, maybe a cooking class, or one of those chili pepper festivals where people pretend to enjoy pain for the sake of Instagram. I didn't realize we were walking straight into a competitive inferno. We met on Hinge. His profile was charming in a way that didn't feel forced. He had kind eyes, a slightly crooked smile, and a bio that said, "Recovering hot sauce addict. I'll try anything once. Even kale. Especially karaoke." He messaged me first. We bonded over our mutual hatred of small talk and our shared love of spicy food. I told him about the time I cried into a burrito because I underestimated a habanero aioli. He told me he once hallucinated during a ghost pepper challenge in college and still went back for seconds. So when he said, "There's a spice challenge downtown this weekend. Want to be my partner in crime?" I didn't hesitate. I said yes. The venue turned out to be a community food event in Tempe, a sprawling outdoor market with food trucks, sizzling grills, and a large stage labeled Spice Slam, Battle of the Heat Freaks. Beneath it, long tables were lined up like a school cafeteria from hell. Each had 2 chairs, a stack of napkins, pitchers of milk, and ominous-looking trays covered with foil. A sign near the entrance read, "Warning, consuming extremely spicy peppers can lead to sweating, crying, visions of your ancestors, and regrets." Harley grinned when he saw me. He was taller than I expected, with sun-bleached hair, a faded black t-shirt, and an energy that screamed former skateboarder turned emotionally available. He hugged me like we'd known each other for months. "You ready to burn?" he asked. "Only if you promise to hold my hair back when I start crying." "Deal." We signed a waiver, never a comforting start to any date, and took our seats at one of the tables. Around us, other couples and spice enthusiasts gathered, some wearing gloves, others already sweating preemptively. A woman with a megaphone took the stage. "Welcome to the 7th annual Spice Slam. Today's challenge includes 6 rounds of increasing heat. You'll each eat 1 item per round. No water. No milk. No tapping out unless you're ready to surrender your dignity. I looked at Harley. We're absolutely going to cry in front of strangers, aren't we? He winked. You say that like it's a bad thing. Round 1 was a mango habanero wing. Easy. Sweet, with a slow burn. We both smiled through it like champs, nodding at each other like, we've got this. Round 2 was a sriracha-soaked meatball. Still manageable. My lips tingled, but I powered through. Round 3 was when things got real. They brought out jalapeno poppers filled with Carolina Reaper cream cheese. I took one bite and immediately regretted every decision that led me to that moment. Harley coughed. Okay, that's aggressive. I waved at my face. Is my skin peeling off, or does it just feel that way? He laughed, red-faced, eyes watering. You're handling it better than the guy next to us. I turned. The man beside us was sweating so profusely it looked like he'd just run a marathon in a sauna. His date had taken off her earrings and was fanning herself with both hands. We made it to round 4, hot sauce-drenched tofu cubes with a side of ghost pepper flakes. I chewed carefully, feeling each bite like a betrayal. Harley hiccuped. I think I'm vibrating. You're what? My soul is trying to leave my body, but in a good way. I was crying now. Not sobbing, just silent, steady tears leaking from my eyes like my face had given up pretending it was okay. Round 5 broke us. They brought out lollipops. Innocent looking. Red, glossy, the size of a quarter. The host called them death discs. I took a lick. It was like licking the surface of the sun. I gagged. Harley made a noise that can only be described as a dying hyena. We locked eyes, both of us delirious. He reached across the table and took my hand. Becky, he said solemnly, if we survive this, I'm naming my firstborn after you. Even if it's a girl? Especially if it's a girl. We tapped out before round 6. So did most people. The final challenge was a raw Trinidad scorpion chili. Only one couple attempted it. They both cried, vomited into matching buckets, and then high-fived. After the competition, they gave us each a sticker that said, I tried not to die, and free popsicles, which felt like both a reward and an apology. We walked away from the chaos, laughing through our pain. My tongue is numb, I said. I think I reached enlightenment somewhere around round 4, Harley replied. It told me to stop eating tofu. We found a shady bench near the edge of the market and sat down to recover. He leaned back, stretching his arms behind his head. You know, he said, this is probably the most memorable first date I've ever had. I smiled. Same. Though I'm not sure I'll ever taste anything again. I don't need taste buds, he said. I've got you. I blinked. That was smooth, I said. He grinned. I've been saving it since round 3. We sat in silence for a minute. Then he turned to me more serious. Do you want to do this again? Something less masochistic next time? I laughed. Like a movie? Exactly. Something that doesn't require a waiver or a fire extinguisher. I'd like that. He smiled. Cool. We hugged again. This time longer. Warmer. He smelled vaguely of smoke and sugar, and when he pulled away, his hand lingered at my waist. He walked me to my car, kissed my cheek, and promised to text me that night. He did. The first message said, still alive. Barely. The second said, you're officially my favorite spice. I replied with a photo of my fridge, open to show my embarrassingly large hot sauce collection. Becky, spice recognizes spice. He sent back a selfie, shirtless, holding a bottle of Cholula on one side and a bag of frozen peas on the other. His face was still slightly red. Harley, still recovering. But worth it. That was a month ago. We've had 4 dates since then. None involved peppers. 1 involved karaoke. 2 involved making out in the parking lot like teenagers. We joke about our first date all the time. He calls me Spice Rack. I call him Ghost Pepper Boy. And somewhere in between the sweat, the tears, and the questionable tofu, something real started. All because we were willing to burn for it. I hadn't been on a first date in 2 years, and my body was reacting like I was about to be sacrificed to a volcano. My hands were sweaty. My stomach was doing things that shouldn't be legal. I'd already changed shirts 3 times, and I hadn't even left the house. The date was with a woman named Chloe. We met on Bumble. Her profile said she liked tattoos, tacos, and telling the truth. She had a half smile in every photo, like she was always 1 second away from calling you out. I liked that. I needed that. The plan was simple. Meet at a trendy ramen spot in downtown San Diego, have dinner, maybe walk by the waterfront after. Nothing complicated. Nothing weird. So naturally, I made it weird before we even got there. In a moment of brilliance, or desperation, I decided to take kratom. I'd heard about it online. Some guy on Reddit called it nature's Xanax but with a kick. It was supposed to calm you down without knocking you out. Perfect, I thought. Just enough edge off to keep me from sweating through my seat cushion. I found a capsule bottle in a local smoke shop that also sold CBD gummies, incense, and bongs shaped like cartoon characters. That should have been my first clue. I took 2 pills an hour before the date. By the time I parked outside the ramen place, I felt okay. A little lightheaded, but manageable. My limbs felt soft. My thoughts were floaty. I could do this. Then Chloe walked in. She looked even better in person, tall black boots, a leather jacket, and this casual confidence that made me feel like a nervous squirrel wearing a human costume. She smiled. "Hey, you found the place." I stood up too fast. My vision blurred. "Yep. Easy." We sat. The waiter came. Chloe ordered spicy tonkatsu. I ordered miso and tried to play it cool. And then the kratom started hitting. Not gently. Not gradually. Like a freight train made of nausea and regret. My stomach clenched. My forehead dampened. I could feel every noodle in the room. Every sound felt too sharp. The lighting looked like it was flickering, even though it wasn't. I tried to focus on her words, but everything was spinning slightly to the left. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head. "Yeah, totally. Just hot in here. It's 68 degrees. "Right. That's what I meant." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you sweating?" I wiped my forehead with my sleeve. "It's excitement." She smiled, clearly amused. "You're kinda cute when you panic." I opened my mouth to answer, but instead, I gagged. Just once. A small, controlled herc. But enough to derail the entire vibe. Chloe leaned back instinctively. Are you okay?" I nodded. "Yes. No. Maybe." Then it happened. I vomited. Not a discreet cough spit into a napkin. Not a polite lean-away moment. An explosive, full-body betrayal. Onto the table. Onto the ramen. Onto the floor. Chloe screamed, just once, but sharp and real. The couple at the next table gasped. The waiter dropped a tray. I stood up, dizzy and dripping, mumbling apologies as I stumbled toward the bathroom. I hit a chair. Knocked over a decorative plant. My legs felt like melted wax. I made it to the sink and stared at myself in the mirror. Sweaty. Pale. Eyes wide like a raccoon caught in headlights. I looked like I'd just escaped a haunted house staffed by nutritionists. I splashed water on my face. Tried to breathe. And then the worst part. I realized I was aroused. Not in a fun way. In a horrifying, body misfiring under stress way. Like my nervous system had short-circuited and decided the best response to public vomiting was an accidental half-chub. I muttered, "No. No. No. You do not get to be involved right now." I adjusted myself, mortified, and stayed in the bathroom for 10 full minutes. When I finally emerged, Chloe was standing near the exit, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Hey," I said, voice hoarse. "I am so sorry." She blinked. "What the hell happened?" "I took kratom." She stared. "You what?" "It's a supplement. I thought it would calm me down." "Did it?" "No. It made me vomit and then get a weird situation in the bathroom." Her brows shot up. "Seriously?" I nodded. She paused. Then, God bless her, she laughed. "Not at me. Not mean. Just out of pure absurdity." "That's a first," she said. "I've had guys talk too much, lie about their height, one guy cried about his ex, but you're the first to projectile vomit and get a boner in the same 10 minutes. I winced. "Can we never say that sentence again?" She smiled. "No promises." I offered to pay for her meal. She declined. I offered to call her an Uber. She said she had her own ride. As she turned to leave, she looked at me over her shoulder. "Next time," she said, "maybe just take a deep breath. Not drugs made by Reddit brothers." Noted. She left. I went back inside long enough to tip the waiter and apologize to the staff. One of them handed me a trash bag for my shirt. I drove home shirtless, windows down, wondering if I should delete every dating app and change my name. But then something weird happened. The next morning, I got a text. "Chloe, so, you still owe me a ramen date. One where you keep your fluids to yourself." I stared at it. Then I replied, "Me, only if you promise not to wear that leather jacket. I can't handle that much pressure." She sent back a winking emoji. "We haven't gone out again yet. But I've retired kratom permanently." And I now carry mints, a backup shirt, and a vow to never, ever underestimate the power of nerves and bad decisions. It started, like most of my bad decisions, with a man who smelled like cedarwood and poor impulse control. His name was Luca. He had a half-smile that always looked like he knew something filthy, and arms covered in tattoos that practically begged me to ask what each one meant. I met him at a bar on 6th Street after 2 margaritas and a dare from my friend to flirt with the next guy who ordered whiskey neat. He walked in like he'd been hired to play the role of regret in a leather jacket, and when he said, "Scotch, no ice," I slid into the seat next to him and said, "Tell me something you regret." He smirked. This conversation, probably. We went home together 20 minutes later. The passion was intense. Not romantic. Not sweet. More like a full-contact sport with a side of whispered sins and one broken lamp. He left the next morning without saying goodbye, which I would have hated if I hadn't already been halfway in love with the chaos. He texted me that night. "Luca, did your lamp survive the trauma?" Me no. But it died doing what it loved. We started seeing each other in that not seeing each other kind of way. Texts at 1 a.m. memes at midnight. Hookups that felt like therapy and demolition rolled into one. He told me he didn't believe in relationships. I said I didn't either. We were both lying. The first time he stayed the night, I woke up with his arm around my waist and a piece of my hair stuck between his teeth. He looked at me and said, "You smell like sleep and sin." I laughed. "You smell like whiskey and bad ideas." We kissed anyway. I told myself I was fine, that I didn't care where he went when he left, that I didn't notice the way he never used my full name, just called me Red because of my hair, that I wasn't cataloging every song he liked like I was building a playlist for a wedding that would never happen. Then came the tattoo. We were lying in bed post-round 2, both of us half naked and fully stupid, when he traced his fingers along my spine and said, "I want to put something permanent on you." I blinked. "Like emotional damage?" He laughed. "No. A tattoo. Something small. Just for me." I should have said no. I should have laughed it off, rolled over, and gone to sleep. Instead I said, "Only if I get to pick where." He grinned. "Deal." The next day we went to a shop he knew. The artist barely looked up from his sketch pad when we walked in. Luca whispered something in his ear. They both laughed. I didn't ask. I should have asked. I lay on the table face down, shirt pulled up, heart pounding. It was just a small one, right above my hip. Quick. Painless. Supposedly. When it was done, Luca kissed my shoulder and said, "You're mine now." It should have thrilled me. It chilled me. I didn't look at it for 3 days. When I finally did, I stood in front of the mirror, twisted sideways, and stared. It was a single word. Mine. In cursive. Black ink. Bold. I stared at it for a long time. Not cute. Not poetic. Not some inside joke or meaningful quote. Just ownership. I didn't say anything at first. I told myself it was fine. That it was just a word. That he didn't mean it like that. But something shifted. He started showing up less. Texts slowed. The sex got colder. Shorter. Like he was checking a box. The last time we hooked up, he didn't even take his boots off. I confronted him a week later. We were at his place. I'd brought takeout. He opened the door shirtless and distracted, and I knew before I even said anything that the conversation was going to end badly. "I don't think this is working," I said. He blinked. "What? This? Us? Whatever this is." He scratched his jaw. "You're the one who wanted more." I wanted honesty. He shrugged. "I told you I wasn't looking for anything serious. And then you tattooed your ego onto my body." He laughed. "You said yes." I was naked and emotionally compromised. He didn't answer. I left the food. Walked out. Didn't slam the door, which I regret. I booked a removal consultation the next day. It turns out laser removal hurts more than the tattoo ever did. Each zap felt like a punishment for being stupid in public. It'll take multiple sessions. Months. Maybe a year. But eventually the word will fade. Mostly. But here's the thing they don't tell you about tattoos. Even when the ink disappears, the memory stays. The way his fingers felt when he said permanent. The sound of the buzzing needle, while I smiled like a girl who didn't know she was being branded. The way I laughed when I should have screamed. It's been 3 months. I'm seeing someone new. He doesn't wear leather. He doesn't smell like bad ideas. He asks before touching me. He calls me by my name. He hasn't seen the tattoo yet. He will. And when he does, I'll tell him the truth. That once, I mistook obsession for affection. That once, I let someone leave a mark on me because I thought it meant he'd stay. That once I was mine. And now, I'm not anyone's. It was mid-October in Chicago. Slight wind chill. Leaves crunching under boots. Everyone else was wearing jackets and scarves. But here came Derek, blazer, chest hair, and the faint scent of Axe body spray trying to pass as cologne. We met on Hinge. His profile said, entrepreneur. Alpha, looking for a woman who knows her worth. He also spelled entrepreneur wrong, but I figured, hey, everyone deserves one typo. At first, he seemed charming. In the I've read half of the 4-hour workweek kind of way. Lots of talk about grind culture and manifesting goals. But he was cute, had nice teeth, and didn't open with you up. So I agreed to dinner. The restaurant was nice. Not fancy, but nice enough that you wouldn't wear flip-flops. Derek, of course, wore flip-flops. We sat down, ordered drinks, and made it through appetizers with minimal weirdness. He told me about his crypto startup. It's like Venmo meets OnlyFans, but for spiritual healers. I told him I worked in marketing and was saving up for some home upgrades, namely a new dishwasher and a better microwave. That's when it happened. He set down his fork, tilted his head, gave me this weird squint-a look, the kind you'd give a cat wearing a sweater. Can I give you some advice? He asked. I blinked. About dishwashers? No, he said, leaning in like he was about to whisper the secrets of the universe. About your priorities. My priorities? He nodded, serious. You're obviously cute. Fun. But if you really want to level up, you need to think long-term. Strategically. Strategically, I repeated. He gestured toward my chest. Not subtly. Not accidentally. A full-on, open-palm air wave in the direction of my boobs. Have you ever considered investing in yourself? It took me a second. Then I realized. He meant implants. I stared at him. He smiled like he'd just recommended a good tax strategy. Don't get me wrong, he added quickly. You're great as is. But a little enhancement could really take you to the next level, socially, romantically, even professionally. I blinked again. Professionally. He nodded, sipping his cocktail. It's not sexist. It's just reality. People respond to visuals. You wouldn't believe how much more attention women get when they've, upgraded. I looked down at my chest, then back at him. You think I should skip the dishwasher and buy new assets? He grinned. I'm just saying, if you're budgeting for appliances, why not start with the most important one? I didn't throw my drink in his face. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I also really liked the drink. It had elderflower in it. And I'm not one to waste elderflower. Instead, I set it down and said, let me get this straight. You think I should blow thousands of dollars, money I've saved from working 2 jobs, so that people like you will pay more attention to me? Not just people like me, he said, as if that made it better. Everyone. And this is something you say to women often? He shrugged. Only the ones with potential. I smiled. Derek? Yeah. Eat shit. I stood up, grabbed my purse, walked out without looking back. He texted me 20 minutes later. Derek, wow. Overreact much. I was trying to help you. Blocked. 2 days later, I got a Venmo request from him for half the meal. The caption said, boob consultation. I declined. Then I sent him one back for $1,200. My request, appliance fund, since I'm already hot enough. He didn't pay. It's been 4 months since that date. I bought the dishwasher. It's stainless steel, energy efficient, and doesn't comment on my chest. I also bought the microwave. It's sleek, quiet, does exactly what I ask without suggesting I change my appearance. Sometimes I think about Derek, usually when I'm loading dishes and feeling smug. I imagine him somewhere, shirtless under a blazer, trying to explain to another woman why her self-worth should be measured in cup sizes and TikTok likes. And I smile, because I may not have brand new assets. It was late April when everything changed, one of those soft, golden afternoons when the world seemed determined to convince you everything would work out in the end. I never expected a casual relationship to unravel in such a bizarre, unsettling way. But maybe spring, with its deceptive warmth and sudden storms, was the perfect metaphor for how Nick swept into my life and left it forever marked. I'd always liked spring in Nashville. The city came alive with cherry blossoms lining West End Avenue, cafes opening their patios again, and music spilling out of every open window in the gulch. The world woke up, shaking off winter's gloom, and for a little while, anything felt possible. It was in that hopeful mood I first met Nick. I ran a small bookstore in East Nashville, tucked away near the Five Points area. A cozy, quiet place named Novel Idea, filled with worn chairs, stacks of novels, and regular customers who lingered over coffee. My life was calm, predictable even, exactly how I liked it. Then one spring afternoon, Nick walked in. Sunlight streaming through the windows illuminated his dark hair and tattoos snaking up both arms, vibrant colors peeking out from beneath his sleeves. His confident stride and casual smile made him impossible to ignore. Noticing my gaze, he grinned warmly, leaning casually against the checkout counter. "You must be Cassie," he said, extending a tattooed hand. "I am," I replied, cautiously amused. "Have we met?" "Nope. But your assistant Beth recommended you," he explained. "I'm Nick. I just opened the tattoo parlor down the block. Thought I'd introduce myself." I smiled politely, intrigued despite myself. We chatted easily for a few minutes. He mentioned his move from Austin, his passion for art, his excitement about East Nashville's creativity. Something about his openness was appealing, refreshing even. Before he left, Nick turned back, grinning playfully. "Hey Cassie, maybe I'll convince you to get your first tattoo one day." I laughed lightly, shaking my head. Not a chance. Yet somehow, despite my initial hesitation, we started spending time together. It began as coffee breaks at Bongo Java, walks in Shelby Bottoms Park, and occasional dinners at Mas Tacos Por Favor. It was casual, comfortable, and surprisingly easy. Nick's energy brought a vibrant contrast to my quiet routine. But as weeks passed, something subtle shifted. Our conversations grew deeper, his laughter warmer, and his gestures became more intimate. In mid-May, during one of Nashville's sudden rainstorms, we sat sheltered under the awning at Barista Parlor, sipping coffee as rain pounded the pavement. He reached over suddenly, tracing gentle circles across my palm, his eyes intense. "You're special, Cassie," he murmured softly. "I've never met anyone like you." Something about the sincerity of his voice warmed me, even as it stirred unease. I wasn't ready for intensity, especially from Nick, whose spontaneity already made me cautious. But I brushed aside the worry, enjoying the gentle warmth of his touch and the soft whispers of rain. A week later, on another perfect spring day, Nick appeared at the bookstore, buzzing with excitement. It was unusually busy, customers browsing quietly, sunlight filling the cozy space. Nick leaned casually against the counter, his grin mischievous. "I have something special to show you tonight," he whispered, his eyes dancing with excitement. "Should I be worried?" I teased gently, ignoring the quiet voice of caution within me. "You'll see," he said mysteriously, turning to leave. "Come by the shop after closing. You won't regret it." Intrigued but wary, I arrived later at his studio, Iron and Ink Tattoos, just after sunset. The shop was empty, the air fragrant with disinfectant and ink. Nick stood beside his chair, grinning broadly, his eyes sparkling mischievously. "What's going on?" I asked nervously, already sensing something unusual. Without a word, he slowly rolled up his sleeve, revealing his forearm. My stomach tightened sharply at the fresh ink, delicate script spelling out my initials, CLH, boldly etched into his skin. "Surprise," he said softly, his voice suddenly vulnerable. "I wanted something permanent. Something to show how serious I am about you." Shock held me speechless. Permanent? Serious? We'd only been seeing each other casually for a few weeks, barely a month. My heartbeat quickened uncomfortably, panic fluttering in my chest. "Oh, Nick," I finally managed. "Why would you do this?" His smile faltered slightly, confusion clouding his expression. "I thought you'd love it. Isn't this romantic?" "Romantic?" I echoed weakly, trying desperately to find gentle words. "Nick, this feels too soon. We've barely started dating. It's just, I wasn't expecting something so permanent." His expression shifted rapidly from confusion to hurt. His arm dropped heavily to his side, disappointment clear in his eyes. The once playful sparkle dimmed abruptly. "I thought you felt it too," he murmured, quietly wounded. "That this was special, real." "It is special," I said softly, stepping closer, trying to soothe his hurt feelings without encouraging more intensity. "But this tattoo, it's just too much, Nick. It scares me." For several painful moments, we stood silently in the quiet studio, tension thickening the air. Nick's posture stiffened, his shoulders heavy with disappointment. "I guess I misunderstood," he finally said bitterly. "I thought you'd appreciate it." "Nick," I began gently, reaching out instinctively. But he pulled away sharply, eyes distant now. "It's fine, Cassie," he interrupted curtly. "Forget it." Afterward, our interactions turned awkward, strained. I struggled with guilt, unsure how to repair the fragile bond his impulsive tattoo had cracked. But something between us had permanently shifted. The ease we once shared was replaced by an uncomfortable silence. As spring shifted towards summer, Nick avoided me completely. I occasionally glimpsed him walking briskly past my shop, his gaze averted. Then one day, I saw him with a bandaged arm, clearly covering fresh work. My heart sank. A quick check of his Instagram confirmed my suspicion. He'd covered the tattoo of my initials, replacing it with dark shading, intricate patterns masking what he'd once proudly displayed. That night, alone in my quiet bookstore, sadness enveloped me. It wasn't just about the tattoo, but about how quickly feelings can blossom and fade, especially when forced into premature permanence. Nick had meant well, but his impulsive gesture revealed a gulf between us, a mismatch of timing, emotion, and expectation. Weeks later, near the end of spring, I found myself strolling along West End Avenue again. Cherry blossoms, once vibrant, had faded, petals scattered on the sidewalks, a quiet reminder of spring's brief, beautiful illusions. Relationships, like seasons, often promised more permanence than reality delivered. I matched with Marissa on a Tuesday. Her bio said, Pisces Sun, Libra Moon, Gemini rising up. Don't waste my time if you're a Scorpio. I should have swiped left right then and there. But I didn't know my rising sign, I barely knew my blood type, and I figured the Scorpio thing was a joke. It was not a joke. We grabbed drinks at a bar called Nebula, one of those Portland spots with reclaimed wood tables, mood lighting, and a cocktail menu that read like a poem written by a drunk herbalist. I got a bourbon with walnut bitters. She ordered something called a moon milk fizz. She looked exactly like her photos, red lipstick, silver rings on every finger, and the kind of bangs you know took maintenance. She smelled like clove cigarettes and sage. I was into it. We chatted. She was funny, sharp. Talked fast, like she had a backlog of thoughts that needed out. I liked her. Until the conversation took a turn. So, what's your sign? She asked, sipping her drink. I hesitated. I think I'm a Scorpio. She froze. Literally froze. Like I'd just said I collect toenail clippings, or vote exclusively for war criminals. She set her glass down very slowly. You're joking. No, I said, already regretting everything. October 30th. Why? She leaned back, crossed her arms, and stared at me like I'd spit in her hummus. Wow, she said. I can't believe I didn't feel it. Feel what? The energy. The darkness. The manipulation. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? She sighed. I've been burned by 3 Scorpios. One cheated. One ghosted. One stole my tarot deck and gave it to his side chick. Okay, first of all, I'm sorry. That's weirdly specific. But I promise I'm not planning to steal anything. She squinted at me. You all say that. Then you disappear with my crystals. I laughed. She didn't. She leaned in. You know what your problem is? Besides being born? You think this is funny. But Scorpio energy is dangerous. Destructive. You're ruled by Pluto. Death and rebirth. You lure people in. You ruin them. Then you disappear like nothing happened. I work in IT, I said. I mostly ruin printers. She blinked like I was speaking ancient Greek. Then she said, you need to confront it. I tilted my head. Confront what? The energy. The pattern. The damage. I took a long sip of my drink. What does that mean exactly? She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed, across the bar, at a man leaning against the jukebox. Tall, slim build, wearing a denim jacket and sipping a cider. He looked like every third man in Portland. That's him, she whispered. I frowned. That's who? My ex-Scorpio number 3. The deck thief. You're kidding. I never kid about Scorpios. I stared at her. She stared at him. Then she turned to me and said the most unhinged sentence I've ever heard on a date. I want you to confront him. I blinked. You want me, a stranger, to walk over to another stranger? And what exactly? Tell him he's a parasite, that he drains divine feminine energy. I choked on my drink. I'm not doing that. Why not? Because I'm not in a 2006 Avril Lavigne music video. She frowned. I thought you were different. I was hoping to be, yeah. She stood up. I thought she was leaving. She was not leaving. She strutted across the bar, hips swinging, heels clicking, and walked straight up to the guy. I watched, helpless, as she tapped him on the shoulder. He turned. She pointed at me. He looked at me. I waved. Weakly. Then she said something I couldn't hear. He said something back. She slapped his drink out of his hand. People gasped. He raised his hands, palms out like, whoa, what the hell? She said something else. He laughed. Then she stormed back to my table, grabbed her bag, and hissed. I thought you'd have my back. I didn't know I was signing up for an exorcism. You're just like him, she snapped. Charming. Passive. Cowardly. Cowardly for not confronting a man I've never met because of his birth chart. She didn't answer. She just left. No goodbye. No hug. No thank you for the $14 cocktail. I sat there for a minute. Then the guy she confronted walked over. Hey, he said. You know her? First date. He nodded. Makes sense. She said you stole her tarot deck. He raised an eyebrow. I dumped her. She threw it at my car and screamed. The moon will curse your seed. I blinked. That's specific. Yeah. We both took another sip. Then he said, You're a Scorpio too? Apparently. He clinked his glass against mine. God help us. It's been 6 months. I haven't heard from Marissa since. But every time I see a horoscope meme, or someone tries to guess my sign based on the way I hold a fork, I flinch a little. Not because I hate astrology, but because I know there's a woman out there, probably burning sage in a bathtub, waiting to confront her next Scorpio. And I hope, for his sake, he's got a solid escape plan. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who fell for a scheme, especially something that seemed so obviously shady in hindsight. But sometimes people come into your life and blind you to reason, making even the most cautious person ignore all the red flags waving desperately in front of them. Natalie was exactly that kind of person. I'd always been careful. As an accountant living in Denver, Colorado, my entire career revolved around precision, detail, and skepticism. My life was stable, comfortable, but admittedly predictable. Each morning, I'd take the same route from my apartment near Union Station, grab coffee at Little Owl, then head to my downtown office on 17th Street. Evenings were usually spent running along the Cherry Creek Trail, dinner at home, and weekends wandering bookstores like Tattered Cover. Predictable, until Natalie walked into my world. We met at a networking event hosted at the Maven Hotel near Coors Field. Natalie stood out immediately, effortlessly working the room with a charisma I'd rarely encountered. Confident, witty, and strikingly attractive, she drew people in, myself included. When we finally spoke, she listened intently, her eyes focused solely on me, as though no one else mattered. Natalie told me about her background, a series of successful ventures, an MBA from UCLA, experience with tech startups in Palo Alto. She seemed legitimate, experienced, and genuine. She had a spark, a sense of adventure I desperately craved in my mundane routine. Soon, we found ourselves spending evenings at Avani Food and Beverage, talking business and sharing laughs, blending personal and professional lives effortlessly. Then, one afternoon over lunch at Root Down, Natalie revealed her next big idea, a wellness product that was poised to revolutionize the health industry. At first, it seemed credible enough, premium supplements, scientifically tested, backed by enthusiastic investors. Natalie's excitement was contagious. She painted a compelling picture of a booming market, easy profits, and most importantly, the chance to build something meaningful together. It's not about the money, she'd always say convincingly, eyes shining. It's about making a difference. Despite my instincts, I found myself intrigued. I liked her confidence, her passion, her vision. But what really hooked me was Natalie herself, how effortlessly she inspired trust, weaving her dream until it became ours. A month later, she invited me to a gathering at an upscale co-working space in Reno, filled with young professionals eager to change the world, or at least their own financial situations. Natalie stood in front, magnetic as always, detailing the business model, recruit distributors, create a sales team, earn commissions. It sounded simple, almost too simple. A voice in my head whispered that it might be a pyramid scheme, but Natalie's assurance drowned out my doubt. Pyramids are illegal, she laughed softly, noticing my skepticism. This is direct sales. Everyone benefits. I ignored the nagging feeling in my gut and eventually invested, not small amounts either. At first, it seemed to work. I brought in some friends who were equally excited. Sales started rolling, checks arrived regularly, and Natalie was thrilled. We celebrated successes at chic restaurants in Lodo, toasting champagne at Rioja, believing we'd cracked the code. But soon, cracks appeared. Sales slowed. The products were overpriced, impossible to sell without recruiting more people. My friends struggled, their enthusiasm dwindling, frustrations mounting. Money that had initially trickled in stopped flowing altogether. Instead, debt started piling up. Stress gnawed at me nightly, sleep becoming increasingly elusive. When I brought my concerns to Natalie, she brushed them aside, a dismissive wave of her hand. "You're panicking too soon," she'd reassure me calmly. "Trust the process. Success takes patience." Patience, I learned, was her go-to phrase, an empty promise designed to string me along. Deep down, I knew I'd been played, but admitting it meant acknowledging I'd ignored every logical instinct, blinded by Natalie's charisma. Eventually, reality hit hard. A news story broke on local Denver stations, exposing the venture as precisely what I'd feared, a thinly veiled pyramid scheme, already under investigation. My heart sank, panic twisting in my gut. I confronted Natalie, frantic and angry, demanding answers. She barely reacted, calmly sipping espresso at Crema Coffee House as I laid out my ruined finances, destroyed friendships, and shattered trust. Her response was cold, distant, a bitter truth she no longer cared to hide. "Ethan, you knew the risks," she said dismissively. "It's your own fault you believed it would be easy." The cruelty of her words stunned me into silence. She offered no apologies, no reassurance, just the cold truth. I'd been nothing but a means to an end. Natalie had gotten what she needed, my money, my connections, and now I was disposable. I watched her walk out calmly onto Larimer Street, leaving me stunned, betrayed, and financially devastated. In the weeks that followed, the damage became painfully clear. Friends I'd brought into the scheme distanced themselves, hurt and betrayed by my involvement. My carefully built reputation crumbled, leaving me ashamed, humiliated, and alone. The confident, cautious accountant had fallen spectacularly, his judgment completely compromised by blind trust. Natalie disappeared from Denver entirely. Her social media showed glimpses of a new life, San Diego beaches, Malibu sunsets, proof she had moved on easily, untouched by the wreckage left behind. I, however, spent months piecing my life back together, wrestling with the painful realization that I'd let charisma override common sense. Yet, even in my darkest moments, something important became clear. Natalie's betrayal had exposed more than just a financial scam. It revealed a vulnerability within me, a willingness to ignore instincts in the face of charm and persuasion. I'm still rebuilding, slowly restoring trust with friends, settling debts, healing emotional wounds. Denver, once a city I adored without reservation, now carries bittersweet memories. I walk the streets differently now, more guarded, careful about who earns my trust. I never thought something as simple as voicemails could unravel my entire life. I've always been the type to dismiss romantic gestures as cheesy or superficial, cute but unnecessary. That changed the day Lorelei walked into my classroom at Sunset Middle School in Portland, Oregon. It had been a rainy Tuesday afternoon, typical Portland gloom, and I was packing away sheet music after my last music class. The squeak of damp sneakers on the polished gym floor told me someone was there before I saw her. Lorelei stood quietly near the door, clutching a pile of books, a bashful smile on her face. She was the new librarian at Sunset Middle. Quiet, quirky, and the exact opposite of my usual type. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but something about her drew me in. Lorelei was different. Maybe it was the way she fumbled nervously with her glasses whenever she spoke, or the way she'd laugh a little too loud at my jokes. Whatever it was, it worked. Our first few weeks together were casual and comfortable. Coffee at Stumptown on Belmont Street, exploring Powell's books downtown. Easy, relaxed dates that never felt forced. Then came the voicemails. At first, they were innocent and charming. Lorelei would leave short messages about a funny thing that happened during her shift at the library, or just to remind me about our dinner plans at Screen Door on Burnside. I liked it. I wasn't used to someone thinking about me during the day, let alone reaching out to share little moments. It made me feel special in ways I hadn't felt in a long time. But soon, the voicemails began to pile up. At first, it was one every few days. Then it became one every single day. Sometimes 2 or 3 in a single afternoon. And they weren't just quick messages anymore. They began to stretch into minute-long monologues. Eventually, each voicemail lasted several minutes, then longer. I remember one rainy Saturday morning vividly. I just picked up a fresh cup of coffee from Blue Star Donuts in the Pearl District, walked back to my old Subaru parked on Everett Street, and saw my phone flashing 3 missed voicemails. all from Lorelei. I played them one after another as I drove home along Hawthorne Boulevard, my stomach nodding as each message grew longer, more intense. She talked about every detail of her day, the books she shelved, the students who visited her in the library, the mundane details of a faculty meeting. Then, she'd slip into how much she missed me, how she counted minutes until we'd meet again. She was earnest, sweet even, but something felt off. It was too much. My phone had become a digital diary of her day, every thought spilling over uncontrollably. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just lonely, I reasoned. She'd moved here from a small town in Minnesota, still adjusting to Portland's eccentric ways. But then, I noticed a change in Lorelei's demeanor. She grew anxious whenever I didn't respond quickly. She'd nervously ask if I'd listened to her latest message, eyes wide, fingers fidgeting nervously with her cardigan sleeves. One evening, after dinner at Fire on the Mountain on Burnside, I decided I had to say something. We sat across from each other, half-eaten wings cooling between us while rain blurred the windows. I chose my words carefully, gently explaining that I enjoyed hearing from her, but didn't need so many detailed messages every day. Lorelei seemed fine, nodding quietly, saying she understood. "I'm sorry, Finn," she said softly. "I'll dial it back. I promise." I believed her. For a while, things seemed okay. The messages slowed, and our relationship briefly settled back into its comfortable rhythm. But a week or two later, I felt her pulling away. We saw each other less, and when we did, something felt strained. She spoke less, smiled less, her green eyes no longer lighting up when we met after work. At first, I assumed she just needed space. Maybe she was embarrassed or hurt. I gave her time, hoping she'd eventually come around. But then I started noticing strange things happening around my apartment near Laurelhurst Park. Books moved slightly out of place, missing notes for music lessons I'd prepared earlier in the week. Nothing big, just oddities. Then came the day everything changed. It was another cloudy afternoon. I returned home from teaching at Sunset Middle, expecting to find the usual quiet solitude of my apartment. Instead, when I opened the door, my chest tightened. The air felt oddly heavy, scented faintly of something metallic and burned. Cautiously, I stepped into my living room, shoes squeaking against the hardwood floor. My eyes immediately caught sight of scattered shards of black plastic littering the floor around my coffee table. My voice recorder, something I'd used for song ideas and recording student practice, lay crushed and shattered. The knot in my stomach tightened. My heart beat erratically as I knelt down to inspect the damage. Beside the recorder, a tangled mess of magnetic audio tape spilled out, twisted and torn beyond repair. Lorelei had been here. Somehow, I knew it instinctively. My eyes darted around, searching for more clues. Nothing else appeared damaged. But why destroy my recorder? Shaken, I reached for my phone, dialing Lorelei's number, but her line went straight to voicemail, ironic considering our recent struggles. I left several texts, asking her if she knew anything about it, but my messages stayed unread. The following morning at school, I waited anxiously in the teacher's lounge, hoping Lorelei would appear to explain herself. But she never came. When I finally went down to the library during lunch break, another librarian stood behind her desk. "Lorelei called in sick," the woman explained. She hadn't been answering calls since yesterday. Days passed. Lorelei didn't return to school, didn't respond to any of my messages. I drove by her apartment near Mississippi Avenue several times, knocking on her door. No answer. Her neighbors said they hadn't seen her in days. Lorelei had disappeared. A sickening dread settled over me. I couldn't sleep, haunted by the image of my shattered recorder and the spilled tape. The apartment no longer felt safe, and each passing day without explanation increased my unease. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, life at Sunset Middle settled back into its routine. The faculty assumed Lorelei had simply decided to leave abruptly, though no one knew why. But I couldn't move on. The unanswered questions lingered, consuming me. Late one autumn evening, as leaves blanketed Laurelhurst Park, I sat alone in my living room, drinking coffee and watching rain run down the windows. My phone buzzed, startling me. A voicemail notification flashed on screen, an unknown number from Duluth, Minnesota. Hands shaking, I pressed play. Lorelei's familiar voice flooded the room, soft yet unsteady, speaking from somewhere far away. "I'm sorry, Finn," she whispered. "I never meant to scare you. But I needed you to understand. All those messages, they weren't just words. They were pieces of me. I destroyed the recorder because I couldn't bear knowing my voice meant so little to you. It's better this way. Please, just forget me." The voicemail ended abruptly, leaving the room filled with silence. My heart raced, pounding painfully in my chest. It had always been more than just messages. Those were pieces of Lorelei, fragments she'd trusted me with. Yet, in trying to preserve myself, I'd unknowingly broken her trust. I met a woman on Tinder, and after a few days of messaging back and forth, we decided to go see a movie. She was cute, funny, and seemed normal, or at least as normal as anyone can seem over text. The conversation flowed easily, and I figured why not. A casual movie date sounded low pressure, and honestly, I was just glad to get off the app and meet someone in real life. When we were deciding on the movie, she said it had to be rated PG. I laughed, assuming she was joking or maybe just preferred light-hearted comedies. I even made some sarcastic comment about how we could sneak into an R-rated one afterward if we were feeling rebellious. She didn't really respond to that, but I brushed it off. Some people just like keeping things PG. No big deal. That assumption was shattered the moment she showed up, with a 5-year-old kid in tow. To say I was caught off guard would be an understatement. I stood there in the theater lobby, trying to process what was happening as she waved me over and introduced me to her son like this was the most natural thing in the world. Meanwhile, I was mentally scrolling through our conversations, trying to figure out if I had somehow missed the part where she mentioned she was bringing her kid on our first date. Spoiler, I hadn't. Now, I'm not against single moms. I actually admire them. Parenting is hard, and dating while parenting? Even harder. But maybe, just maybe, a heads up that this wasn't going to be a one-on-one situation would have been nice. Instead, I was standing there in my date night outfit, trying to figure out how I'd suddenly become the third wheel on someone's family outing. Before I could even decide how to react, she hit me with, "Oh, by the way, can you grab some popcorn for him? He loves the extra butter." Excuse me? I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that there's a child involved, and now I'm supposed to foot the snack bill? Don't get me wrong, I'm not cheap. If the date had been going well, or if I'd known what I was walking into, I wouldn't have thought twice about buying popcorn. But under these circumstances, it felt less like a date and more like I'd accidentally signed up for babysitting duty. Still not wanting to make a scene, I bought the popcorn. And a soda. And some candy. Because once you're in, you're in. The movie itself was exactly what you'd expect from a PG flick. Animated characters, slapstick humor, and just enough plot to keep a 5-year-old entertained. I spent most of it sneaking side glances at her, trying to figure out if she thought this was going well. She seemed completely at ease, laughing at all the jokes and chatting with her kid like this was just another Saturday afternoon. Meanwhile, I sat there sipping my drink, wondering if this was some kind of test to see if I could handle dad mode right out of the gate. After the movie, she thanked me for coming and said her son had a great time. I smiled, nodded, and made some generic comment about how it was fun. Then I got the hell out of there. Later, she texted to say she had a really nice time and hoped we could do it again soon. I stared at my phone for a long time, trying to figure out how to let her down gently. In the end, I told her she seemed great, but I didn't think we were looking for the same thing. I'd been chatting with this guy I met online for a couple of weeks, and honestly, things were going surprisingly well. So well, in fact, that I found myself actually excited for our first date. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but let me tell you, after years of navigating the nightmare that is modern dating, genuine excitement is rare. Usually, it's more like mild curiosity sprinkled with dread. But this guy, he seemed different. Funny, charming, and, unicorn alert, emotionally available. Or so I thought. Since I liked him, I wanted to make a great first impression. I treated the date prep like it was my personal Oscars red carpet moment. First stop, the salon for a blowout because nothing says I have my life together like perfect hair. Next, I spent entirely too long on my makeup, blending, contouring, and highlighting like my love life depended on it. Then came the outfit. I tried on half my closet and vetoed each option for reasons that made absolutely no sense. Too casual. Too dressy. Too, I didn't try hard enough. Too, I tried too hard. Finally, I landed on the perfect balance, casual yet flirty, like, oh, this old thing? I just threw it on. It took an hour to achieve that effortless look, but it was worth it. Feeling like a solid 9.5 out of 10, I texted him as I headed out the door to let him know I was on my way. No response. No big deal, I told myself. He's probably driving. I got to the bar, picked a cozy little table, and ordered 2 waters, one for each of us, plus a glass of wine for myself. I figured he'd show up any second, flash me that charming smile I liked so much in his photos, and apologize for being a few minutes late. Except he didn't. 20 minutes went by. Still no sign of him. I sent another text. Hey, everything okay? Nothing. I stared at my phone, willing it to buzz with a reply. Instead, the screen stayed blank, mocking me. My glass of wine disappeared a little too quickly, so I ordered another one, this time fueled by a growing mix of anger and humiliation. I started imagining all the possible reasons he might be late, or, let's be real, why he might have stood me up. Maybe he lost track of time. Maybe his phone died. Maybe he got hit by a bus. Or maybe, and this was the scenario I fixated on, he was just another flake who thought nothing of wasting my time. As the minutes dragged on, my irritation turned into full-blown rage. I'd spent hours getting ready, hyped myself up for this date, and now I was sitting alone, staring at my untouched waters like an idiot. The wine and the sting of rejection made a dangerous combination. I grabbed my phone and channeled all my anger into the most scathing text I've ever written. I called him every name in the book, accused him of being a coward, a liar, and a complete waste of oxygen. I told him he clearly had no respect for me, my time, or basic human decency. Then I ended it with the piece de resistance, 3 simple but effective words. Go F*** yourself, asterisk. Satisfied, or maybe just tipsy, I hit send, slammed my phone down on the table, and finished the rest of my wine. That night, I wallowed in my disappointment, convinced I was doomed to die alone, possibly surrounded by cats I didn't even like. Dramatic? Sure. But in my defense, being ghosted sucks. The next morning, I woke up feeling hungover, not just from the wine, but from regret. I reread the text I'd sent, and cringed so hard I nearly imploded. But hey, what was done was done. At least I wouldn't have to think about him anymore. Except I did. Because that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from him. My mom died, Samantha. I think my stomach actually fell out of my body. Horrified doesn't even begin to cover it. I wanted to throw my phone across the room and crawl into a hole forever. Suddenly my fiery, self-righteous tirade wasn't just over the top, it was monstrous. I immediately texted back, this time pouring out an apology so long and desperate that it probably qualified as an essay. I told him how sorry I was, for his loss, for my behavior, for being an absolute psycho. I tried to explain, but what could I even say? I'm sorry I verbally attacked you while you were dealing with the worst day of your life, doesn't exactly fix things. I waited for a reply. And waited. It never came. Not only did he not respond, but he also blocked me. Honestly, I don't blame him. If I were in his shoes, I'd probably block me too. That was 2 years ago. Sometimes I still think about him. What could have been if I hadn't let my insecurities and a couple of glasses of wine get the best of me? We could have hit it off. Maybe we'd be in a happy relationship right now, planning our wedding or arguing over throw pillows. Or maybe it would have fizzled out after a couple of dates anyway. Who knows? What I do know is that the whole experience taught me 2 things. 1, never, ever send angry texts while drinking. And 2, you never really know what's going on in someone else's life. One night in college, I was out with a group of friends, doing what college kids do, drinking cheap beer, pretending we were sophisticated because someone brought a bottle of wine, and debating life's most pressing questions, like whether pizza rolls or bagel bites were the superior drunk snack. It was one of those nights where the music was too loud, the room was too crowded, and everyone felt invincible. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary to happen, just another night of bad decisions and blurry memories. But then one of the girls in our group started getting really friendly. At first, I chalked it up to the drinks. She'd laughed at all my jokes, leaned in close when we talked, and found any excuse to touch my arm. But as the night went on, her flirty comments became a little less subtle, and by the time we were taking turns in the photo booth someone had dragged into the corner, it was obvious that her interest wasn't just friendly. She wasn't the kind of girl I'd ever expected to end up with, more confident and outgoing than I was used to, but something about her boldness was magnetic. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were stumbling out of the party and heading back to my dorm room. Now, I need to pause here to set the scene because my room was less of a room and more of a glorified closet. It barely fit the essentials, a desk I never used, a closet that was mostly empty because I lived in hoodies and my pride and joy, a leaky air mattress that I'd convinced myself was just as good as a real bed. Spoiler, it wasn't. By the time we got there, we were both tipsy, giggling over nothing, and too caught up in the moment to care about the sad state of my living situation. I turned on some music, low enough to keep things romantic, but loud enough to drown out the sounds of my roommates in the next room, and we started making out. Things escalated quickly, as they tend to do when you're young, drunk, and convinced you're about to star in your own college rom-com. And that's when it happened. At first, I didn't notice the faint hissing sound coming from the mattress. We were too caught up in the moment, tangled up in each other, and ignoring the fact that the air mattress had already seen better days. But then the hissing got louder, and suddenly, I felt the bed sinking underneath us. "Wait," I said, sitting up and looking down. "Do you hear that?" She blinked at me, dazed and definitely still buzzed. "Hear what?" And then thump. The mattress completely gave out, and we crashed onto the floor in a heap of tangled limbs and deflated plastic. For a split second, we just stared at each other, processing what had just happened. Then we burst out laughing, the kind of uncontrollable, can't-breathe kind of laughter that only seems to happen when you're tipsy and under 25. I tried to smooth things over, joking about how the air mattress was just keeping us grounded or adding some excitement to the night, but any attempts at coolness flew out the window when we started trying to adjust. The deflated mattress provided absolutely no support, so every time we moved, we ended up bumping into the wall, or worse, sliding off completely and landing with another loud thump. At one point, we were mid-kiss when the mattress shifted again, slamming me into the wall so hard I saw stars. She couldn't stop laughing, which made me start laughing, and suddenly we were less concerned with hooking up and more focused on not falling off the mattress entirely. And that's when my roommates got involved. First, there was a loud knock on the wall, followed by one of them yelling, "Could you two please keep it down?" That just made us laugh harder. But then the knocks turned into pounding, and the yelling turned into full-blown shouting. "For real, some of us are trying to sleep. You sound like you're wrestling a bear in there. Just deflate it all the way and get it over with." By now, the mood was completely gone. The girl rolled off the mattress, still giggling as she grabbed her clothes and started getting dressed. "I should probably go," she said, and I didn't argue. I walked her to the door, trying not to trip over the lifeless plastic heap in the middle of my room. She gave me a quick kiss goodbye and disappeared down the hall, leaving me to deal with the aftermath. I spent the rest of the night trying to quietly wrestle the mattress back into some kind of usable shape, but it was no use. The thing was done. It looked more like a crumpled tarp than a bed, and I ended up sleeping directly on the floor with a blanket balled up under my head as a makeshift pillow. The next morning, my roommates wasted no time grilling me about what had happened. "So, did you two survive the earthquake in there?" one of them asked, smirking. "Or was that just you trying to break the sound barrier?" I rolled my eyes and tried to play it cool, but there was no living it down. For weeks, they brought it up any time they had the chance, especially when the girl and I bumped into each other on campus.